Hello everybody. Today I want to go over a bit of a touchy topic on this channel because anytime I talk about WUA beta characters, I have pseudo intellectual WUA players trying to act like they know better than me, and then 90% of the time they're wrong because they're only here to stalk my channel to hate, right? And I feel so vindicated when it comes to my take on Yuno now because man, it aged like fucking fine wine, right? So, for those who weren't here for my Yuno beta videos, basically, I said that she was bad value. Okay, I wouldn't recommend pulling this woman for literally anything because she doesn't specialize in anything, right? Like, you can make an argument she's just general versatility, can be used as main DPS, can be used as sub DPS, but she doesn't really specialize in almost anything, right? Basically, every single time someone talks about Yuno and her value, the only thing they can ever bring up is basically her wheelchairing Gion. That's it. No joke. Every single time I talk about Yuno value, they just bring up her wheelchairing, literally the first 1.x DPS that ever released in the game. Brother, who cares? This shouldn't add to her value that you can wheelchair almost any older character. You can wheelchair older characters with Augusta quick swap. You can do the same thing with Prolova, right? This isn't something special to Yuna. I don't understand why people act like it's special to her, right? But whatever. In the first place, the main point of my entire older video on why Yuno is such bad pull value is mainly because of her supportive capability. I always said that she had very good DPS capability, and that main DPS Yuno honors were the ones really winning, right? Because she did a lot of damage for a sub DPS, and now she does even more with Linne. It's about Augusta level, if not just a tad bit slightly weaker, right? But, once again, her buffing capability is ass, which means her value is ass, because no offense, as a sub DPS, if your only specialty is damage, that's underwhelming, okay? These gacha games are filled with power creep. Your damage will become less significant towards a total team's DPS the further and further we go on, and then you'll just end up in a fucking Yin-Lin situation where everybody glazed, oh, even if the buffing isn't as good, she has damage, and now everybody makes fun of Yin-Lin. Yuno is literally going to be the exact same situation here. I promise you she is, right? So, for more context of why I think the way I do, it's because of Linne, right? Basically, Linne, being a sub DPS in a majority of her teams, does the same, if not more, sub DPS damage than Yuno when she's a sub DPS, right? Unless she's wheelchairing older teams and hogging up half the on-field time. If she's doing that, then sure, she does more than Linne. But because of Linne's ability to do Tune Rupture and Strain and just get a hit, get a quick tick of 100k plus damage extra every time you Tune Break, Linne does about 400,000 damage in just her normal sub DPS rotation without hogging too much on field time, right? If anything, she might actually hog less time than Yuno does in her sub DPS rotation, which is incredibly impressive, right? So Linne has a much more straightforward way of doing her rotation, and on top of this, she also does more damage while doing it. However, on top of this, she has way stronger buffing, right? It's not really a secret to anybody at this point that Linne's buffing, especially because of how many general buffs there are in her kit, has basically power crept the value of every other sub DPS in the entirety of the game. And this is why Pride Wins Tier List decided to put Linne in T0 and then drop literally all other sub DPSs down to T0.5. Even though all previous sub DPSs have had strong teams, it's mainly just been the specific niche that they are targeted towards, right? So when you put them outside of that niche, their value now looks pretty underwhelming, right? However, this doesn't apply to Linne. Linne actually power creeps Zeshi and Yin-Lin in a lot of teams. I've heard Carlotta with Linne might even possibly be stronger as compared to using Zeshi. Linne Mornai for Augusta is actually only about 5% weaker as compared to Augusta, Yuno, SK, and this isn't including the fact that Mornai has a 50% off-tune buildup increase, meaning that's about a 50k, if not more, damage increase overall because of Linnea's tune ruptures. So this means the damage difference becomes even lower, and now it's on some shit like 2 or 3%, right? These teams are neck and neck, despite the fact that Linnea and Mornai aren't in the slightest actually meant for Augusta, right? Which is incredibly impressive. So Linnea has power crept the entire sub DPS roster, and now when we look at Yuno, let's talk about her in all the places she can possibly be, right? A sub DPS, a buffer, and a main DPS. Now the one thing with Linnea is that she actually did also buff Yuno's main DPS, and people are using older Chem calcs to say that she's stronger than Augusta. However, I believe Chem has updated the calcs since then, and they're basically on the exact same level, right? It's not really that Yuno is stronger, they are very comparable. Still impressive for a sub DPS, right? However, that doesn't really matter because there's already a ton of main DPSs in this game that can perform better than Yuno, and then on top of this, there's also an upcoming 2 new main DPSs in 3.1 for version 3 who will likely be stronger than a majority, if not all, of our older teams, and now Yuno's value as a main DPS simply isn't high, right? She wouldn't even be in the top 5 anymore, despite getting buffed by Linnea and having like this entire best-in-slot team, right? So her value as a main DPS isn't special at all. She's kind of like normal for a 2.x main DPS, and she'll likely fall behind when it comes to the early 3.x main DPSs, and then noticeably fall behind when it comes to the later 3.x DPSs, right? However, what about her sub DPS capability? This is what so many people glaze when I talk about this character. As always, I've said her damage is good, and you can pull her if you like her, of course. However, meta-wise, it's not the greatest thing to pull for, right? Once again, in a majority of teams where Yuno isn't absolutely hogging the field time, because an older character getting the field time would just be weaker, she usually does less damage than a Linnea. It just is what it is because of the entire tune rupture thing. So as a sub DPS, she's weaker than Linnea in most case scenarios, unless she is wheelchairing older teams where she hogs a ton of the field time to be on field way longer, right? So that's kind of that. After this, we have her buffing capability. Now this is especially why I went so hard on Yuno. If she had Linnea levels, if not even just slightly weaker, of buffing capability, then I wouldn't have ever said anything about her, right? She would have been a decent pull. But her buffing capability is dog shit. Even in Augusta, and I'm bringing up the Augusta Linnea Mornai and then Augusta Yuno SK thing, the reason why this comparison matters so much is Augusta is literally the only DPS in the entirety of the game who can fully take advantage of Yuno's buffs because of the fact that Augusta has a constantly refreshing shield, right? This was one of the biggest talking points when it came to Yuno value, was that, yeah, sure, she's a 20% upgrade over Mortefi in an Augusta team. That's not bad. That's good for free-to-plays. However, you then need to further consider that for any other heavy attack buffer coming in the future, her boost to their damage would be even less than this, because they likely wouldn't make another heavy attacker who refreshes a shield a bajillion times a second just to shill Yuno. They'd probably just sell a new sub DPS for them, right? So if we were to get an Augusta level DPS, same power level, but they didn't have constantly refreshing shields, the difference between her and Mortefi would genuinely be fucking minimal, right? It would be insanely minimal. So Mortefi, the 4-star, has better buffing than the limited 5-star heavy attack buffer for like 99% of actual heavy attack characters in this game. That is completely embarrassing. Her value as a heavy attack buffer is, no offense, just completely in the dirt. So when you look at main DPSs, she's arguably maybe top 5, right? Maybe. Might even be outside of the top 5. I'm not sure when you actually deep it. However, I guess that's usable, right? That's still decently worth pulling on. After this, you have her sub DPS capability. There's a way stronger sub DPS in the game called Prolova. Okay, you can use Prolova to wheelchair older teams too, except she has way more team options if you do want to run her main DPS or sub DPS. And then on top of this, she's an absolute monster in Wiwa, which a lot of people find annoying, right? So Prolova has higher value as a sub DPS immensely, in my opinion. The only thing you can argue here is if you have like an insane skill issue. Prolova obviously doesn't have healing, while Yuno does. That's basically the only advantage she has over Prolova as a sub DPS. And then as a buffer, she's garbage. Like, there's literally no sugarcoating it. Her buff for heavy attack buffers outside of Augusta, it is just so goddamn bad. So after only 3 patches with the release of Linné, my take on Yuno's value back then has been completely fucking vindicated, in my opinion, right? She is going to age badly. She's going to be another Yinlin where people glazed her for her damage early release, right? And then later on said she sucked because her buffing sucks. Literally, Yuno is this exact same case scenario, right? I don't think Yuno is an actually good pull in this game. Now, if you already have Yuno or you really like her, does this mean she's gonna break your account? No. This is the same thing I have to say every single time I talk about Awua beta. Chisa is still gonna give you value if you've already pulled her or if you really like her, right? Every character is going to have some level of value on your account if you already own them or want to go for them. But in terms of pull value, right? Like, how badly should I pull this character? How many meta teams do they fit in? Yuno doesn't fit anywhere, right? She's not the most meta sub DPS. She's for sure not the most meta buffer. And she's also for sure not the most meta main DPS. And we have new 2 3-point-X main DPSs in the next patch who will likely power creep the entire roster we have currently, right? So she'll go even further behind. She is a very, very bad pull, in my opinion. This basically goes back to the entire Sparkle thing, right? People reacted the same way to my take on Sparkle on HSR, and it ended up aging incredibly well if it weren't for these upcoming buffs for her, right? Where yes, if you already own Sparkle, if you really like her, she has value. She's a Harmony. She's a generalist buffer. She can generate skill points. However, she is going to be phased out so quickly. There's going to be newer characters that are just significantly stronger, and you're going to regret actually having wasted your pulls on this character instead of someone as good as like Tribby, right? Or Robin. The exact same thing applies here. I bet so many people wish they could trade their Yuno pulls to guarantee Linné and Mornai instead, because that duo is just way fucking stronger. And if you want to talk about like wheelchair comps, the duo of Linné and Mornai is so strong, they wheelchair like 80% of this game's teams, right? Giving them even further more value. And then on top of this, you need to consider that Luke is a basic attack damage dealer, and he also likes this entire tune break thing. So it's likely we may even possibly get another Linné, but for basic attack damage, just for Luke, likely somewhere in 3.2. Love you all. Hope you have a great day. Hope you have a great night. Once again, don't be ashamed if you did pull Linné. It's not like she's gonna break your account. She still has good value. It's just that if you don't have Linné, I would literally never recommend pulling her unless you really like her. Hope you all have a great day. Hope you have a great night. Peace out.